What I'd like to do is to present for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and then I'll have conversation with you on the content. So my goals for our time together is just to present our approach to next generation clinical ethics, which is a quality improvement approach to ethics. It's just Trinity Health's version. There are, I'm aware of at least 2 other Catholic systems that are also using this model as well as the Veterans Health Administration. I want to provide some examples of implementing the quality improvement approach from our own experience, and then engage you in discussions about quality improvement in your own healthcare services. How we got started into this was in the late 90s. There were a number of articles beginning to appear in the literature that began to question sort of the efficiency and the effectiveness of ethics committees and what they did. And we were wondering, were we sort of implicated in those, and were there things that we could be doing better? And so as a system, we began to look around the country to see sort of who was cutting edge, who was doing better, and then where we were, and to see if we wanted to adopt a new model or transition ours to something else. So between 1999 and 2002, we had a number of folks from other healthcare systems come and present to our folks on what they were doing that we thought was sort of cutting edge. And ultimately, in January of 2003, we decided to adopt the next generation model and to use it within Trinity. It was a model that was initially developed out of the Healthcare Ethics Center at St. Joseph's Health System in Orange, California, by people like Judy Ross and David Blake, Jack Glazer, and others. And so we found theirs to be the most valuable and decided to transition it into our system and to sort of adopt it or adapt it to what was specific about our committees and the work that we were doing. This is from a survey that was put out by or assessed by the Veterans Health Administration. Fox, Myers, and Perlman did it. It was recently published. These were exactly when we assessed where our ethics committees were in the late 90s and early 2000s. This is exactly where we were and the deficiencies that we saw within our ethics committees and the reason why we transitioned to the next generation model. Our committees were not particularly respected or influential within their own healthcare organizations. They tended to be narrowly focused on clinical ethics, and they didn't look beyond sort of, they actually were very focused on case consultation more than anything else, and had very little to do with ethics in other areas within the organization. They were pretty isolated, and some were very isolated. I mean, they pretty much functioned within a room, 1 hour a month, with very little interaction with other departments or units within the facility, and oftentimes had no contact with many of those. And I think they thought that they were integrated because they had representatives from various departments on the ethics committee, but in fact, when the meeting was over, there was nothing that really developed between meetings in those departments or areas. They tended to be reactive and case-oriented instead of proactive and system-oriented. That was our biggest complaint and the reason why we went with the model. If policies came to them for regular review, which they do because of Joint Commission, they reviewed the policies. If a case came up that a department couldn't handle, it came to the ethics committee. But it was only reactive to what came their way. They didn't seek out much within the organization and how they could improve the ethical orientation and behavior of the organization. They did lack resources, expertise, and leadership support. Some were much better than others, though, in having those. They did not consistently follow specific quality standards, And I have to say, we rarely evaluated or held accountable the performance of ethics committees. The way they typically evaluated themselves at the end of the year was how many case consultations did they do, how many educations did they provide, how many policies did they review. Is 36 cases in a year good or bad? We had no way of assessing whether less cases were better or more cases were better. The education, did it have any impact within the organization? Did it better? If we did it in the community, did the people who come to us in any way demonstrate that they were more ethically competent than when we didn't provide the education? We had no way to assess the effectiveness of our ethics committees. And so it's hard to justify an ethics committee to your administrative team, especially if you want a budget, when you have no idea what value you add to the organization. And so we knew we were on a dead-end street and we needed to change, and this was the direction that we went. So it's a quality improvement approach to ethics, and in Trinity the focus is on policy, process, structure, and system improvement that affects the ethical quality components of the patient care experience. That's basically how we sort of defined it when we first rolled with this process in 2003. When we started the transition to the next generation, we consulted with the folks at St. Joe's in Orange, California. They had similar foundational components to their efforts, and we adopted and adapted some of these components to fit where we wanted to go. The one thing that they did caution us about when we rolled out this process and initiated it within the system is that it was a huge, more of a cultural shift than they had anticipated when they rolled it out. So they expected that people would adopt it and be on the board, moving with it and progressing rapidly, and didn't realize what a cultural shift it was for ethics committees to move from the traditional committee and functions to this new model. So we created resources along with these foundational characteristics to help our committees move. And I have to say, there were still plenty of problems as we progressed. So the first foundational characteristic that we held tight to is that the committee's proactive and not just reactive. That it focuses not only on the resolution of individual ethical dilemmas, so committees love doing case consultation one at a time, but also on identifying and addressing system processes which may lead to such dilemmas in the first place. Now, if you remember, you could track historically case consultation and ethics committees when discontinuation of the ventilator was a big issue, and for a number of years that was the primary issue that came to every case consultation was discontinuation of the ventilator. That's going back to like late 80s, early 90s when ethics committees were new, or maybe even earlier than that. Then for a number of years, every case consultation that we got was on removal of nutrition and hydration. In the last number of years, every significant case, or more or less, that came to the committee was on fetal treatment. And after you do about 5 or 6 or 7 of these within a 6-month period, you begin to ask yourself, what's the issue here? Aren't there things that are inherently wrong about our policies or our processes or structures that we keep getting these repeat cases and resolving them one at a time? What's wrong with the system or the way that we're thinking about this that gets us to sort of this repeat issue? So this is why we thought that this was an important approach for us to take, to be proactive, to go upstream from each of those cases to find out what's inherently wrong about our policies or our approaches, our processes, and our structures that get us there. The second foundational characteristic that we adopted was that the committee is organizationally integrated and not isolated. That we work closely with management. Many of our ethics committees did not have a representative from the senior leadership team. Usually the chief nursing officer or the chief medical officer was not a member of the ethics committee. Oftentimes it didn't have anyone from senior leadership that could take those issues, especially if you're looking at matters of structures and processes within the organization. You need someone who has the authority and the power within the organization to represent that issue and to see that those changes happen. If you don't have that kind of leadership on the ethics committee and it's a management mid-manager below on the ethics committee, rarely do the issues get the attention and sort of the courage to change structures and processes and policies within the organization. So it's very important that we are involved in a relational way with management, departments, teams, individuals, and others within the organization, much more broadly than the traditional ethics committee. The other thing that was really important about the process is if it's a quality improvement approach to ethics or a change management approach, that people from quality management and change management also be on the ethics committee. So that is the case with all of our committees currently. The third foundational characteristic is that the committees are accountable for performance based on demonstrable outcomes and not only worthwhile activities. I think we felt like we were doing a lot of good things 7 years ago and longer, but we had no outcome measures to prove that we were about anything valuable. So we began to measure set specific targets that have both qualifiable and quantifiable ways to be measured. And the fourth characteristic is that the committee is oriented to the organization's mission and core values along with legal, regulatory, and accreditation concerns. The issue that we encountered was most of the time the ethics committee paid attention to ethical principles and patient rights issues, mostly things related to the section of the Joint Commission. But if you assessed any one of our ethics committees and the conversations that they had, you could have been in any other organization. There was nothing specific about a Trinity ethics committee conversation. No reference to our mission, to our core values, to the culture of the organization. It could have been the hospital down the street having exactly the same conversation. And we thought that it was important if we have commitments about healing body, mind, and spirit, or commitments to social justice, compassion, respect, etc., that those kinds of words and concepts actually make their way into the conversations around case consultation and into our policies within the organization, etc. So what we were asking our committees to do was not only to do the traditional functional responsibilities of case consultation, education, policy review, and development. We asked them now to take on the responsibilities of system improvement and to do all of those functional responsibilities in light of the four foundational characteristics of being proactive, integrated, committed to demonstrable outcomes, and oriented to mission and values. So we were asking our committees, and at the time we didn't think it was such a big deal, to sort of leave the comfortable waters that they had been currently in, and I have to say, I would tend to say to leave the stagnant waters that they had been in, and to move upstream to try to find out what are the issues in the organization that prohibit us or interfere with the way that we provide patient care that ends up resulting with ethical issues.